Everybody, Christopher here, and I'm trying out this new lav mic for this installment of 12 Rules for Artists. This is not a product endorsement because I'm just testing it out, but what is this? The Alvoxcon lav mics. I'm learning a lot about audio at the moment, and so I'm getting different audio options. You can see I've still got my shotgun mic and my I'm blocking on what this is called. Different mics. But the great thing about this is that now I can walk around. I can be over here, way back here. I can step away, and I can be up close, and the audio remains the same because it's with me all the time. Anyway, I'm really excited about this. For future projects, it's always good to have audio options, but that's not what this episode of 12 Rules for Artists is about. So, rule number 2, we're getting to it. I'm bearing the lead. Sorry about that. So, rule number 2 is there are no rules, so make some and stick to them. I'll start by talking about something called headcanon. So if you are familiar with any franchise, any story, there is what is called canon, and canon is the history of that storyline. This becomes important to any fan of any franchise or any storyline, whether it be The Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, or one of my favorite storylines, the Aliens franchise. I don't even want to say the Aliens franchise. For me, Alien and Aliens are the story, and everything else is just people trying to kind of reinvent or add superfluous material onto the story, and it really doesn't do anything to serve the story. I think that the original Alien was a masterpiece, and Aliens was a lightning in a bottle. Everything about it should have failed, but ultimately it advanced the story and brought it to a logical conclusion that didn't need more after that. But then all these people, now there's prequels and there's sequels, and things got weird and ridiculous and, cartoony and all this weird stuff. So, for me, my personal canon is the canon of the first 2 films. And then you have what's called, fan films, studio films, headcanon, whatever. I don't know. Everybody's different. Everybody chooses to accept the parts of the story they want to, and they're free to reject the rest. But as a creator, you don't want them rejecting any part of your story. So the way to make sure that everything that you create, everything that is in the universe of your story, is to set rules, or what I like to refer to as story logic, and stick to that. And I believe that as long as you stick to that story logic, you can do whatever you want. Now, story logic isn't just the ground rules of the universe. Obviously, you think in terms of like Warner Brothers cartoons. The story logic of those is very farcical. Ridiculous things can happen. Buster Keaton used to do these kind of ridiculous things in his early films, and then later on, as he started to do feature films, he started to think to himself, well, I really don't want to have things that happen in my movies that are so ridiculous that it takes the audience out of the reality of my story. Again, reality is a very loose term with story, but if you set those ground rules, your story has a reality, a story reality. So once you break that, like I said, it pulls the audience out. But the other thing that you really have to keep in mind is what I would call not just the story logic of the reality, but the thematic logic of your story. If your characters have an arc to go through, and your story thematically has an arc, a reason for existing, then you need to stick to that. And I think a lot of franchises go awry because, the entire premise, for example, of the Terminator, the first two Terminator movies, is Sarah Connor goes from being a kind of a down and out, nothing's going her way, every woman, to the mother of the savior of humanity. And that is the entire point of the story existing. So when you have Sarah Connor in the sequel have her child, and her child gets to a certain age and he has to take on the responsibility, a lot of what happens in his life, his character development, his arc, comes from what Sarah Connor originally went through, and what the Terminator means to her, and versus what it means to him, and his point of view, and how he kind of gets the torch passed from her to him. She has this great knowledge that has kind of undone her in a way, and she feels this great overwhelming responsibility that she has to pass on to her son, but she's reluctant to. She's reluctant to let it go because she doesn't trust that anybody else can manage the knowledge that she has. But ultimately she has to learn to trust that her son really is this leader, and therefore kind of release the reins to him. Once you get into another movie where it's, oh, we didn't stop Judgment Day, we just postponed it, and, Sarah Connor's now dead, spoiler alert, and John Connor's a hopeless alcoholic, and, now he's got to meet Catherine Brewster, or Punky Brewster, I don't know, what's all that stuff, and then from there, just trying to revitalize the franchise by changing the timeline again and again. And then it's not John Connor anymore. It's just this other girl that is, Sarah Connor suddenly got to teach her. It's just it just becomes superfluous. It becomes unnecessary. And it defies the story logic. Another example that I'll give, and that I come across quite often, and I think this is an important one to talk about, is, again, I'm a fan of the Aliens franchise, and I'm a fan of the original Blade Runner movie. There's a lot of people out there who, in their headcanon, have decided that these two movies are in the same universe. Well, that doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't behoove anyone to entertain that too seriously, or to insist that it's true. Now, again, this is not just story logic, but logic in general. These are two franchises that come from two different studios. Yes, they share a director, but they come from different minds. Alien originally came from the mind of Dan O'Bannon and Ron Shusett. And later, David Giler and Walter Hill added an android to the script. Later, Ridley Scott went on to do Blade Runner, and that had replicants. Now, there's differences between replicants and androids. Androids in the Alien franchise have their machines. They have a lot of organic-like components, but they're still machines. They require electricity, as witnessed when they woke Ash back up after breaking his head off. They have a milky fluid inside. Replicants, on the other hand, are kind of these constructed organic bodies. They have red blood. They have lifespans. They're different. There's all sorts of things to objectively look at and discern that these are not meant to be shared universes, but people in headcanon want to put them together, and they start insisting and doing mental acrobatics to make it work for themselves. In my opinion, this is kind of harkens back to my other video, How to Be a Fan Without Infantilizing Yourself. This is kind of a worrisome phenomenon to me, because not only is it just a weird thing to pursue in general with fiction, but people pursue it outside of fiction as well. We kind of have this society that continues to ignore factual evidence to draw conclusions from, simply so that they can draw their own conclusions from them and insist to everyone else that what they want to believe is so. Now, what does this have to do with stories? Well, again, I think it all kind of comes together into one thing, because stories are essentially simulations that we create, and we play them out to see how aspects of ourselves survive against them. This is not me talking. This is actually, as far as psychology goes, this is something that has been generally theorized of why we do this. You know, we may not travel to space and confront alien creatures, but in the past, if you were a hunter who went out and then came back and told stories of the hunt around the campfire, as, you know, darkness surrounds everybody and strange noises come out of the dark, the hunter kind of spins tales about what it is that's out there, and you know, the various people that went out to confront it and either were devoured by it or found some way to persevere. Again, these are simulations, so that we're not just going out into the world completely unprepared. So, you know, Alien, for example, is, you know, we may not go out into a spaceship, but we go off to work. Some people's work is very laborious, dangerous, can take you away from your family for a long time. You go to other parts of the world, you encounter strange alien things. They're not technically aliens, but they are things that, if you're unfamiliar with, can be dangerous to you. And so, you know, I think the brilliance of Aliens was that it's a story about someone who's confronted this thing once, barely got away with their lives, and came back more prepared, with more knowledge. And even though it was still a very tough challenge, she was able to survive, where other people who took the original accounts for granted were, again, consumed by it. So I'm getting off track here a little bit. Essentially, stories do matter. And it does matter that we set rules within our stories and stick with them. Because once we start getting arbitrary about our rules, once we start breaking our rules to do something that we think would be cool, what we're saying are the rules we've set down and the logic that we've created for our stories don't matter. And if you do that, then you're saying that your story itself doesn't matter. You're asking your audience not to take it seriously. And you're also kind of supporting the idea in real life that if you ignore reality, if you ignore facts, or if you listen to people who are willing to lie or omit to get you to perceive things in a certain way, that's okay. You rob your audience, especially young people who watch your movies, of the ability to discern fact from fiction in real life. Again, these stories matter. They matter to people as fans, but they matter as well as simulations of things that may be useful in real life. Going back to stories, though, when you create a story, you need to keep that in mind. If you want to add on to your story after the fact, if you think to yourself, well, I told this story, but now I'm thinking about it, and I would like to add this, or I'd like to do a prequel or something like that. This is my problem, again, going to the Aliens franchise, with the sequels and the prequels that came after Aliens. You know, something like Alien versus Predator, the first one, is fine because you're almost kind of separating that out. It's kind of just like a monster battle, comic booky type of thing that you can just separate from the canon of the first two movies. But the others that they try and integrate in, they ultimately cheapen and degrade the quality of what was originally created. And I know there are people that are going to disagree with me with that, but I think it started with Alien 3. Thematically, Alien 3 did not fit in with the first two Aliens. The first Alien, even though people want to say it was nihilistic, it really wasn't. It was just a man versus nature story, and a man versus nature story where it showed that there was a chance to survive it, no matter how insurmountable it was. The second movie was kind of as Burke says in the movie, the get back on the horse story, where you have a character who essentially starts the movie saying, like, I don't want to go back, I'm too afraid, you don't need me, my input doesn't matter anyway, you go out there, you're either going to blow him away or it's going to kill you, But then she's convinced to go back. And what does she find there besides the aliens? She finds Newt. And what is Newt? Newt is another survivor. And Newt is someone younger, more innocent, who has gone through the same trauma she has. And suddenly she finds that it's not just about her. She goes from, like, it's not worth going out there, you're going to die, to meeting Newt and turning into a person that says, it is worth going there, and if I die, it will also be worth it. I didn't say that very well, but essentially, it's all encapsulated when they're ready to go, and Bishop goes to Ripley, and Ripley says, I don't want to hear it, she's alive. She's saying now, she's not thinking about dying now, she's thinking about what she is willing to die for. So that's a character arc, and that makes sense. And when she goes back in and she rescues Newt, that closes the arc from the beginning of the first movie all the way up to now. It makes sense. So when you create a third movie where you say, oh, no, we never mind all that, never mind that arc. We want to go and give you something where, these characters are dead and she's alone again and it's just her against the elements in space. It's not about anything anymore except for that nihilism, that nihilistic point of view. And it breaks everything that has been built from the foundation up in the first two movies, simply to have an alien running around in a movie that's not really about anything, and a character that doesn't really have an arc. She has a want. She wants to die because she's got an alien inside her. And that's exactly what she gets. She doesn't learn anything. She doesn't have an arc where something is, she gets something out of her experience that changes her perspective and brings her to a new understanding or a new approach at the end. And then Alien Resurrection just kind of tries to redo Aliens without any of that thematic stuff. And then Ridley Scott comes back and he creates Prometheus and he creates Alien Covenant, and by that time, he seems to be more in love with the idea of replicants and synthetic robots and that sort of thing, and that might have been able to work if it was originally tied into everything, but originally Ash was just a robot that was planted on the ship by the company in order to, gain this bio weapon organism thing that they can study and replicate, which honestly I think for me is the weakest subplot of Alien is kind of, and Aliens as well. Like, what are you gonna do with these things? You're gonna study them and then you're gonna what? You're gonna, you can still blow them away with guns and tanks. It's, they're not a very efficient weapon unless you're planning on committing mass genocide against an entire planet colony somewhere, which is never elaborated on. So anyway, I'm going off course. Again, with Alien Covenant and Prometheus, it's just, reinventing what the engineers are and that sort of thing. All of this is just kind of tacked on. It's like you've had years to think about this stuff and you still don't have fully formed ideas of what it is you want to do, but you figure, hey, I'm going to get the studio to finance this, and then it just turns into a mess, and then you have your audience going back to that headcanon, essentially performing mental acrobatics to try and justify the choices you make. And it's only because they love the franchise so much that they kind of don't want to admit to themselves that the rest of these movies don't make sense, that they're bad. And so people start arguing about it, because then you get the other camp that's like, yeah, these movies don't make sense. They are bad, and I don't really want them, and I don't really need more of it. versus the people who are going like, well, I just want to love this franchise in every way so much that I'm willing to commit any logical fallacy and convince myself of it to make sure that I can justify loving and wanting to continue to consume all of this stuff. And it's just, it gets, like I said, it devalues the quality of what it was originally that you loved about it. And so as a storyteller, you really have to think to yourself, do I want to do that to my franchise? If you have a franchise, or your book trilogy, or your comic book limited series, or whatever it is you're doing. You need to set those ground rules and you need to stick to them. And if you stick to them and you tell a good story within them, the readers or the viewers, the audience, the fans, whatever you want to think of them as, they will stick with you and they will be happy. And if you do something like kill off a character or create a tragic moment, as long as it continues to serve the overall story logic, the overall arc, and you continue to focus on that stuff and assure your audience through your storytelling actions that those things do matter, then your story will always matter to them. But if you want to abandon those things for the sake of a new idea that doesn't quite fit in, for God's sake, don't shoehorn it in. Because the audiences feel that, and that's the Star Wars sequels, the Aliens prequels, the Terminator sequels, the Halloween sequels, Doctor Who. The list just goes on and on. Star Trek, Discovery, all these things. You will always find people who enjoy the new stuff, but if you ask them what it is that they enjoy about it, you find that it's because it's antithetical to the stuff that came before, which they never really liked. They always saw it as something that needed to be changed. So that's not good. If you come up with a great idea, don't shoehorn it into an already good story. Don't hijack your story or somebody else's story with that idea. Use that in something else. Develop it into something else. But for God's sake, make those rules. Keep that logic. Stick to it. Don't break it. And you will have a tale, a piece of art that endures for all time. So thanks for watching, everyone. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And I'll be back with more rules. Take care.